April 14, 1912, 11:40 p.m. The North Atlantic is a black mirror. No moon, no wind. The water so still it looks painted inside the first-class smoking room, for men are playing cards. Leather chairs, cigar smoke curling toward the ceiling, the clink of crystal. One of them, a textile magnate from Philadelphia, is winning. He doesn't look up when the ship shutters, none of them do. To decks below. In third class, a young woman from County Cork is already asleep in her bunk. She has $40 sewn into the hem of her coat. She's 19. She's never been anywhere. She doesn't feel the impact at all. On the bridge, Frederick Fleet has just hung up the telephone. He called down to report the iceberg 37 seconds before collision. 37 seconds, the ship takes 2 hours, and 40 minutes to sink. What happened during those 160 minutes would eventually teach psychologists something terrifying about the human mind. And in that window, 160 minutes, something ancient and strange unfolds. Inside every human being on board. Here is what doesn't make sense. The Titanic carried 2,224 people. The lifeboats had capacity for 1,178. That's already a death sentence for over 1,000 souls. But when the boats were finally lowered, many of them weren't even full. Lifeboat 1 left with 12 people. It could hold 40. Passengers stood at the railings and watched the half-empty boats row away. Some of them went back inside to their cabins. One man, a first-class passenger, was found playing piano in the lounge as water crept across the floor. Several couples were seen simply standing together, motionless, arms round each other, staring at nothing, on the lower decks. Hundreds of third-class passengers wandered the corridors for over an hour before finding a way up. Some waited, some sat, some knelt and prayed in 4 different languages simultaneously. The ship was sinking. They knew the ship was sinking, and yet, something in the architecture of the human mind simply refused to process it. In 1987, a behavioral economist named Daniel Kahneman, who would later win the Nobel Prize, was investigating a phenomenon he called System 1 thinking, the brain's fast, automatic, pattern recognition engine, the part of us that has survived for 200,000 years by assuming that tomorrow will look like today. He wasn't studying the Titanic, he was studying stockbrokers, but his partner, Amos Tversky, had been quietly cataloging disaster responses for years. Plane crashes, building fires, floods. There was a pattern buried in survivor testimonies that kept surfacing like wreckage. People didn't run. They stood. They looked around at other people. They waited for a signal that it was okay to panic. Social psychologists call it normalcy bias. The brain, when confronted with something genuinely unprecedented, doesn't sound an alarm. It searches its library of past experience, finds nothing comparable, and quietly concludes, this probably isn't as bad as it looks. Researcher John Leach spent decades at the University of Portsmouth tracking this. He followed it into oil rig explosions, into capsizing ferries, into burning nightclubs. For example, in a nightclub fire, people stopped to finish their drinks. During a ferry disaster, passengers queued politely as the vessel rolled. In an oil rig explosion, workers walked back to their lockers for personal belongings. Then researcher John Leach noticed something disturbing. He found that in almost every mass disaster, roughly 75% of people become cognitively paralyzed in the first critical minutes. They don't scream. They don't run. They tidy their desks. They finish their drinks. They look at the person next to them and wait for someone else to move first. The Titanic wasn't a tragedy despite the 2-hour window. For many of those who died, 2 hours wasn't enough. The data, when Leach finally published it, was quietly devastating. Survival on the Titanic had almost nothing to do with physical strength, wealth, or access. It correlated most strongly with one factor: proximity to someone who had already decided to act. Passengers near a crew member who moved. Passengers near someone who stood still. The survival rate for first-class male passengers was 33%. For third-class female passengers, it was 46%. Social class, the great organizer of Edwardian life, nearly inverted itself in the lifeboats, because third-class passengers, accustomed to hardship, had weaker assumptions about safety. The normalcy bias was, in a grim irony, most lethal to those who had the most to lose, those for whom life had always confirmed that everything would be fine. This plays out in smaller, quieter disasters every single day in relationships, We stay past the shutter. We feel the impact, the coldness, the contempt, the slow withdrawal, and we return to the smoking room and pick up our cards. This probably isn't as bad as it looks. We wait for someone to tell us it's time to go in organizations. Employees feel the iceberg before leadership does. They stand at their desks and watch the lifeboats, job offers, exit opportunities, and they wait for a signal, for permission, for someone else to go first. In politics, populations absorb what would have once been unthinkable and file it under probably fine until the water is at their knees, and even then, they look left, look right, and take their cues from whoever is standing closest. On social media, we have constructed an entire architecture of normalcy bias at scale. 1,000 people watch something wrong unfold in real time. They look at the view count. They look at the comments. They wait. For example, a creator loses everything in public. Millions watch. Nobody intervenes. Everyone assumes somebody else will. The comment section becomes a lifeboat full of spectators. The brain hasn't changed since 1912. Frederick Fleet, the lookout who spotted the iceberg, survived. He lived until 1965. He spent decades being asked the same question. Why didn't you call the bridge sooner? He had been watching the darkness for hours. Nothing, 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 and then something. But the something was subtle, ambiguous. His brain, running its 200,000-year-old program, did what it always does when something unprecedented enters the frame that waited for confirmation. He called when the shape became undeniable 37 seconds before impact. Here is the realization. The Titanic didn't reveal what people do in crises. It revealed what people do every day and simply made the cost visible. The same calculation that kept those passengers standing at the railing happens inside you at the meeting where something is wrong, at the relationship that has gone quiet. At the moment you feel the shudder and decide to finish your drink first, the iceberg is almost never the surprise. The surprise is how long we've already been watching it, waiting for it to look more like an iceberg. If you found yourself thinking about a relationship, a job, a habit, or a problem you've been quietly watching for far too long, then this story wasn't really about the Titanic. And if you enjoyed deep dives into human behavior, psychology, history, and the hidden forces that shape our decisions, subscribe and join us for the next investigation, because sometimes the most important lessons aren't found in what happened, they're found in why people watched it happen.